Hey everyone, welcome back to Becoming a BS Artist. And again, in this case, BS stands for behavioral science. If you were hoping to learn how to become a bullshit artist, I can help you, but I'm not helping you in that series, so maybe check out some other videos on YouTube. Today we are talking about choice architecture. Again, this whole series is learning the fine art of using tools like choice architecture to motivate people to take action for the planet. So let's get into it. What can we do with choice architecture? We'll start with a quote, as we do for most of these episodes. This term, coined by Thaler and Sunstein, refers to the practice of influencing choice by organizing the context in which people make decisions. And this comes from behavioraleconomics.com. So what does it mean to organize the context in which we make decisions? It sounds pretty complicated, but actually if we look around our house, we're probably doing this to ourselves already. Have you ever put out some exercise clothes, have them ready for the next day because you want to make sure you get your ass in gear and you go exercise? That could be an example of choice architecture. You ever hang your reusable bags right near the door so that you remember to put them in the car for the next time you go grocery shopping? It's also an example of choice architecture. You know, some people put water on the side of the bed to make sure that they start their next day hydrating by drinking that glass of water. Some people hide their sweets and candies in the house so that they don't feel tempted to overindulge. My husband just recently found where I hide the chocolate chips, and guess what? They're gone. So that's why we use choice architecture. They kind of prompt us to follow through on the actions and habits that we are trying to follow through on. And sometimes we do them to prevent temptation from doing some of the things that we are trying not to do too much of. So oftentimes we choice architecture ourselves, and there's ways that we can design the spaces around us and the spaces around our audiences to prompt, encourage, guide, and motivate these desired behaviors and actions. When I was doing research for this topic, really kind of, dive deep into the world of choice architecture, this quote really stood out for me. While it is tempting to think that choices can be presented in a neutral way, just the facts, ma'am, the reality is that there is no neutral architecture, and that bolding is added by me. Any way a choice is presented will influence how the decision maker chooses. I mean, in some ways, it's like, my gosh. And think about this. After you've watched this, spend the next few days, every space you enter, and think about the fact that there's no neutral architecture. The way that space is designed is prompting you, nudging you to do a certain thing in a certain way. Now, we see this around us all the time. I mean, when you go into banks, I don't go into banks that often anymore. We tend to use everything digitally. But last time you went into a bank, they probably had those ropes that tell you where to stand in queue, and with the intention of, we're going to stand in line in an orderly fashion and wait until that next person is done with the teller before we advance. Right? That is an intentional design to create order. Think about the grocery store. When you go to check out and there's all that candy and gum there, and that is done intentionally. People know that your impulses are going to be high there. You're going to be waiting and just staring at the stuff potentially for a while. And that's not neutral. That's designed with the intention of getting you to buy crap that you don't need. Now, thank you for John Travolta and this meme and this GIF that tells us that actually, even when things aren't designed very well or very intentionally, it's still not neutral. Right? You go to these places where people didn't really think out that layout of that design, and there's nothing there that really helps us find what we're looking for. That means they have created a choice architecture of confusion. Still not neutral. It's feeding us and prompting us to do something, which is be confused and just buy whatever the hell we can find in that moment. So let's see if choice architecture is going to be a good fit for your project. I'm actually going to start from the bottom up this time. So I'm going to read choice architecture, how I'm presenting these bullet points. So the first thing to know that if you want to do this, it's really only a good fit for any projects where you have control over how the options are being presented to your audience, or you have, a direct line to someone who has control over how those options are presented. So for example, like a menu. So if you can't control the menu, maybe you're working with a restaurant or a chef to see how they can redesign the menu to highlight healthier or more sustainable options. So this is not going to be a good fit if there's no part of your project where you can control how things are presented. There's no website, no space, any of that. So if you don't have that, maybe you want to move on to the next video unless you're curious about choice architecture in general. So in addition to that, this is also a good fit for any project where your audience will be facing a number of different options where they need to make a choice. And there are going to be some choices that are better than other choices, right? Some choices are more sustainable. Some choices are, better, more healthy for the audience, and some are less healthy. So this is a space where audience is facing a lot of options, and really your goal and your intention is to help guide them towards those better options. And really, this gets into ethics a little bit, which I'll talk about at the end of today's episode, is you want to ensure that the interest of the audience is aligned with those choices that you're helping them make. In essence, you are not trying to nudge or choice architecture your audience into doing anything that's harmful to them or harmful to anyone around them. All right. So again, this gets into ethics. I'll make a brief mention of that before we close out today. So if you think this is a good fit, let's think about, why does this even work? What does choice architecture do? Similar to feedback loops, it reduces uncertainty. And I so love this photo, one, because the pigeon is inside the circle, but also because it talks about how choice architecture makes things so simple and easy and straightforward for us. This was during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we always had to be mindful to stay 6 feet apart. We also learned how effing hard it is to know the distance of 6 feet from another person. These circles on the ground just reduce all of that cognitive load, so we don't have to figure out what 6 feet is, just stand in the circle, right? That reduces that uncertainty and just tells me what to do. Super helpful for this last one, and I know these emojis are a little bit messed up. That helps busy people make the right decisions, right? We're all busy. We have too much going on. We have a lot of choice overload because there's too many options, and we need things simplified just so we can get through the day and get done the thing that we're trying to get done. So choice architecture helps our audience go through that process of making decisions so it's less overwhelming and helps busy people follow through on what they're trying to do by not throwing everything at them at the same time. So here's what you need to get started. Some of this I covered a little bit before in terms of good fit, but you want to make sure that you have access to a decision-making setting that you have permission to either redesign or alter. This could be something digital like a website or an app. It could be a physical space. So it's maybe a space that people are coming into, or if you're doing a booth at an event or hosting an event, all of those things are spaces that you now control and can redesign to fit the needs of your goal and your audience. Even reference materials, like I talked about the menu before, any materials like that can also be redesigned to help our audience make decisions. It's important to have a clear understanding of what the audience's experience is like with those materials or platforms or spaces, and when they are encountering decision-making moments, especially ones that tend to be confusing or a little bit uncertain. And a little bit of that, you might even have to walk through the space yourself and say, okay, where do I need to, make a decision? What am I looking for? Am I looking at a signboard? Am I looking at a piece of paper to make that decision? Are there big signs pointing me in the right direction? Or if I wasn't part of this, would I be completely lost and not know what to do? So kind of going through that, putting yourself in your audience's shoes really helps to highlight where some of these more confusing moments happen for the audience. And certainly of the different choices that your audience might be making, you want to have a clear sense of which ones you are ideally nudging them towards. Let's get started with implementing choice architecture. First thing you want to do is modify those options. If there's a way to make this super simple, like painting circles on the ground, go ahead and see how you can do that. This is a great example. This is in a public park area where as people transition from one part of the park to another, ideally they should be wiping off their feet to make sure that there's no invasive plants or bugs that are transferring from one part of the park to another. Now, if this was completely wide open and you had this little mat in the middle and you had that sign saying, please wipe your feet, chances are 60% of more people are not going to wipe their feet. They're not even going to pay attention. right? Because they're busy and they're doing their own thing. That's how we are. That's human nature. So instead, it actually forces people to walk through this certain narrow passageway where that mat is, and people, just by stepping on that mat, are achieving the desired behavior. So this is a great example of choice architecture. Where is there a space to do this? This is really just some 2x4s they put up, and now they have 100% compliance instead of like 40%. So start by looking for areas to modify those options to begin with. We can have some fun with now drawing attention to the better options. We want people to put their trash in these bins. How do we draw attention to the fact that we have provided bins for you to dispose of your trash? Maybe we make a game of it. And maybe it's not always this fun. It's just kind of bigger signage or, arrows that point in the right direction, whatever it takes. But make sure that you are drawing people's attention there. So it's not just better options that exist out in the dark that no one can see. We also want to make those options or present those options in a way that are appealing to the audience. This is where our messaging comes in. So it's not just about, hey, this product over here has the lowest CO2 outputs of any other product. Okay, maybe that's helpful, but for most of the audience, that's not really appealing. This could be, it's good, great on your wallet and it's great for the planet. Cool, I'm going to pick that one. Thank you for directing me that way. This is a great example from Marketing for Change, encouraging people to choose better beverages being ones that are still super tasty, but not so sugary. So they drew attention to different options, just like the slide I showed before, and made it appealing. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Every choice in this category is a good option. Make your life easy. Go ahead and choose one. We also want to add in some kind of promotion and buzz around making those better choices. So this is, a little bit more of a campaign fanfare around it. So we're not just, plugging our jackfruit tacos today. We're doing it because it's part of Meatless Mondays. Meatless Mondays is about heart-healthy meals and having some plant-forward options. So we can add some kind of greater pizzazz around the fact that we are directing people towards certain options. In fact, the Marketing for Change example I showed previously comes with a larger campaign around it of what it means to choose a better beverage and why it's healthier for us and healthier for the planet too. But here is where I want to give a caveat and a warning. The caveat is good choices in certain contexts does not always necessarily translate to good habits and good behaviors. Right? So if you have control over a setting, let's say it's a restaurant setting or a cafeteria setting, and you are successfully able to redesign the choice context there so that more people are choosing the most sustainable meals or dishes possible. That's awesome. But it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to go home or go to the grocery store or go to another restaurant and make those same smart choices, right? Because you're control the context, but what happens within that context may not translate to what happens outside of that context. That's why I recommend in the previous slide to add a little bit more promotion around it so that it's bigger than just what somebody is experiencing in that one setting. And a warning, I mentioned this earlier, choice architecture must be implemented ethically. Right? We're not asking our audience to do something that's not in their best interest or something that would be harmful for them or something that they don't want to do. We're not here to put anybody's back against the wall. We're here to help people who want to make these decisions, healthier decisions, more sustainable decisions, more ethical decisions. We're helping them do that in an easier way so they don't have to sift through piles of information, which they don't have time to do, to figure it out. Again, people should always retain their own choice and their own agency to make whatever choices they want. It's not about stripping choice away. It's about redesigning the choices so it's easier to understand what a better decision looks like. If you're able to implement choice architecture, I'd love to hear the examples that you're working with. It is such a great tool, but also pretty underutilized because not everyone realizes that we have the space where we can redesign the context. So if you're using it to help motivate people to take action for the planet, I'd love to hear about it. Let me know in the comments. So stay tuned for some of the other episodes that I have out on becoming a BS artist. So we have ones on scarcity, gamification, and feedback loops. You can get the entire booklet where I have reference materials and more in-depth information on these at brooktully.com. Thanks.